Everyone around the NFL getting camp compliant as deals can become official and the new league year begins. Notes on the Chiefs and Niners and Raiders and some very interesting teams, some big names signing, Nick Bosa, DeAndre Hopkins, and is Aaron Rodgers next? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. If you are an everydayer and you're still not subscribed to this podcast, come on, what are we doing? Pause right now. Hit that subscribe button. Helps us out tremendously, and always also helps other people find the show as well, so we can hang out every day and talk NFL football through free agency, trades, the draft, and get ready for the 2025 NFL season every day as we do on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're new to the program, welcome. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast and get those questions in for the post-free agency mailbag coming up this week as well. At BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a comment on YouTube. Let's go to Buffalo. And the Buffalo Bills are going to replace a old injured pass rusher in Von Miller with a little bit younger, but still somewhat old and injured pass rusher in Joey Bosa. Joey going to the Buffalo Bills, sort of a dark horse team for Joey Bosa. There was reports that the Niners and the Miami Dolphins were in on Joey Bosa. Reports that Joey and Nick wanted to play together in San Francisco, but it looks like you got a little bit more money from Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills swooped in, 1-year contract, $12 million, worth up to $15 million for Joey Bosa. And I've been asked, Matt, by a lot of 49ers fans, my gosh, what's going on here? How could Joey Bosa pick the Buffalo Bills rather than staying in California and playing with his brother? And I think it's two simple answers. I think he got more money from the Bills and probably has a better chance to win a Super Bowl with the Bills.
Yeah, I think my two simple errors would be Josh Allen. Like, who doesn't want to play for these guys? I mean, they've been banging on the door. If it wasn't for the Chiefs and a little bit of bounces here and there, I just pulled up all their acquisitions, and I think it's been a good offseason for Buffalo. I want to get to Bosa in a minute, but Josh Palmer's a nice pickup for them. Extended Shakir. I love that they extended Rousseau. They pick up Larry Ogunjobi as soon as the Steelers cut him, just as a rotational defensive front guy, and they signed Hamlin back today. Extended Bernard. So a lot of familiar dudes they kept around. And it is so similar to the Von Miller situation, which they thought they were Von Miller away from, winning the Super Bowl. And I don't think their logic was wrong. He was an older guy that got hurt, and we know that Bosa's an older guy that gets hurt a lot. But I don't mind going back to the well. I'm sure there's some people like, didn't you just try this and it failed? Doesn't mean it was a wrong process. You know what I mean? And a part-time player, they want a rotation up front, and the defense is what's held them back from winning more playoffs and Super Bowls.
Yeah, and Joey Bosa is 6 years younger than Von Miller, too. Von Miller 6 years ago was helping, was the type of player that helped the Los Angeles Rams win a Super Bowl. So Joey Bosa still has a lot left. It's just that he's not been on the field for a full complement of games in recent seasons. If he can be on the field every snap, he's a difference-making player for the Buffalo Bills. And it's not a long-term deal either for Joey Bosa. So we'll see what that looks like. And look, he still has a lot of time in his career to go play with his brother if he wants to. The Buffalo Bills really just feel like one of the more stable organizations in the NFL with what they build around Josh Allen. And, and every year they kind of, they don't go crazy ever with a whole bunch of big moves and big trades and big additions, but they try to bring one guy in every year. With Von Miller, they try to, Amari Cooper can help us out. It's not going to cost them to bring him in. Joey Bosa could help us out. Let's try to add to our team and get a little closer while taking care of our own and really building this thing slowly and steadily. And maybe they should make a bigger splash to try to get over that hump and beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and get that Super Bowl win. But they really have been like, one of the more stable builds over the course of the last, well, basically since Josh Allen started playing good in his second, third year in the NFL.
And I don't even think it's slow and steady. I just think they have good vision. They know who they are. They do a good job keeping their own. I didn't even mention they extended Allen when they didn't need to, but I mean, it's just give him a huge chunk. I think they're doing things the right way. I would expect their draft to be very defensive heavy. I'm not sure what else they need on offense. I know some people have said, give him another receiver, but Allen can, make chicken stew out of chicken droppings. He doesn't need the best receivers in the league. Give me as much defensive help as I can get in the draft.
Yeah, and you can still add a guy, but then, next, Bosa's on a 1-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
Draft the guy that you develop behind Bosa. By the way, Bosa with his injuries, you need 2 guys for one position just in case he misses half the snaps of the year. Maybe a dynamic pass rushing rookie would be a nice pair with him.
Mm-hmm. Learn from him a little bit too. He's obviously a technician, and Rousseau's in his prime. It'd be a nice situation for sure. If you get a pass rusher falls to you, I would grab him in a heartbeat. I'd consider one of those big time safeties too. Starks or the South Carolina kid whose name I butcher like crazy. I mean, they had Poyer and Hyde for a million years, and it's never been quite the same. I mean, hey, we all root for DeMar Hamlin, but he's not Poyer and Hyde.
Well, remember last offseason, there was a lot of players that left Buffalo, and it was kind of a similar.
I thought it was a rebuild year
with the 49ers. Like, oh, this is transitional rebuild year. And it's like, nope, they're going to be the same really good football team. Yeah, but like a 6'2", 220-pound athletic freak of a safety, Nicky Manwari, if he's a guy at the end of the first round, or Malachi Starks would be a great fit as well. Yeah, you're right. And there's plenty of wide receivers throughout the draft that they could probably add as well.
And I don't know where Coleman's at, and they added Palmer and Shakir, and Kincaid needs to step up. I don't know who the outside the number X is. That was supposed to be Amari Cooper, and it didn't really work out.
As of now, Josh Palmer is the second highest paid wide receiver per year, $12 million per year contract, 3-year deal there for Josh Palmer with the Buffalo Bills. So taking care of that wide receiver spot. Behind Davante Adams, who's making $22 million a year for the Los Angeles Rams. DeAndre Hopkins now added to the mix, goes from KC to Baltimore. He'll be in his age 33 season this year. A 1-year, $5 million contract. Hopkins is basically the mercenary wide receiver of the league now, and just like let's go chase a ring with different franchises and see if we can get one. That's where DeAndre Hopkins is. What do you think about this veteran wide receiver market right now?
I'm interested. I mean, I always give the Ravens the benefit of the doubt. I think you talk about stable organizations and knowing your people, and rarely make bad moves. I'm not going to say this is the Derrick Henry move, but I mean, we're talking about potential future Hall of Famer that played with Henry in Tennessee. I do think Hopkins played with a bad knee all year, but I also think, he's on hole 17 out of 18, no matter which way you cut it, and he never ran that well to begin with. But a go up and get it guy makes some sense. I know that they've been in, the Deontay Johnson trade implied they were looking for a third receiver in a big way. Hopkins is a lot different than Bateman, who I think is an improving player, and Zay Flowers, who's his own specialty type guy. There's been a lot of rumors that I think aren't unfounded that Mark Andrews could be on the move, not because he dropped that pass, but because he's got 1 year left on his deal, and they're really tight against the cap, and I think it saves like $8 or $9 million. So if you need one more go up and get a red zone dude, I'm cool with it.
Interesting. And they like Isaiah Likely, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. Good tight end draft. Maybe draft one in the second or third round too, and replenish that. They brought back Ricard too. I didn't know if they'd be able to do that.
No shortage of wide receivers in their 30s right now. Stephon Diggs is still out there.
I know. I wanted to go there. Yeah.
Yeah. Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson's age 29 season. Tyler Lockett released. Mike Williams, Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds, all those guys in their 30s.
I think Cooper Kupp at 4:00 is going to be on that list as well. So what did Hopkins get? 1 year, $5 million?
Yeah.
I would think Diggs and Cooper get more than that. Do you think Keenan Allen gets more than that?
They might be upset because they probably were hoping 1 year, $10 million. And they saw D-Hop go 1 year, $5 million, and like, shoot, that's what teams are going to throw at us now too. So it might be second, third wave by the time, maybe post-draft when some of these guys get finally signed. And everyone needs a wide receiver, but some teams might be like, well, let's see how the draft goes and we'll call you back.
Would any of them interest you?
Who's got the most left? Amari Cooper.
I would say Diggs
wasn't quite that guy. I'm kind of rooting for Brandon Cooks to play for all 32 teams eventually.
Yeah, that'd be great.
His career, so
got a good pace.
Tyler Lockett, I'm not super interested in at this point. Robert Woods is just like you're just
he's been the same guy for 3 years.
You're really, even Josh Reynolds, he's been a nice player, but I would for sure wait on all these guys. I think if you want the slot guy, I'd probably go Keenan Allen, even though he's the oldest on the list.
I would go Keenan Allen or Cup if I'm looking for the culture guy, slot guy, move the chains guy, not big play guy. If anyone gets back to being an every week fantasy starter, I'm not saying a top 10 receiver, I would say it's Amari Cooper or Diggs. I thought Diggs played well for the Texans before his injury, and it was kind of easy to overlook it. And I read Matt Harmon's reception perception yesterday on Amari Cooper. He does great work, and actually he joined us at the Combine. And I thought he was dead on. I mean, he said Cooper played some of his best football this past year with the Browns and then was terrible with the Bills. But if you remember, he had like a knee when they traded for him, and receivers getting on a moving train is always tough. So I don't know what to make of that.
New scheme mid-season that
right. It's really hard.
It might be second to quarterbacks for being difficult to try to jump in and know the whole playbook and be exactly where you need to be in every route, every play for your quarterback.
I mean, just people are like, well, why would that be? And it's like, well, because the second you trade for him, the whole building's only worried about beating the Jets, and you get 2 or 3 practices to do it. It's not like, let's get Amari acclimated. And then because he had that injury right away too. And it was like, all of a sudden the season's behind you. Right.
Yeah. No installs all off season long.
Right.
So you're probably like, the play call comes in. And you're like, shoot, I didn't study this language. I studied French, not Portuguese. What does that mean? Where am I going right here on this route? Like
an option route. Am I doing the right thing?
Yeah. Am I choosing the right option? The same option my quarterback's going to choose, right?
Absolutely. No, it's much harder for a receiver to join a team late than people think. And he had an injury, so maybe Cooper or Diggs are okay.
Yeah, and Cooper Kupp would probably be still the number one. Staying healthy is important for him. He's not on my list. He's not officially a free agent yet. You know who else isn't officially a free agent yet? Aaron Rodgers is going to be maybe a Pittsburgh Steeler once the new league year begins. And notes on the Niners, are they tearing it down? What's going on there? The Raiders are a fascinating team as well. Coming up next. Today's episode, Peacock and Williamson, brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. But with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. And BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and more affordable than ever. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. BetterHelp makes it easy to fit therapy into your schedule, whether you're working, parenting, always on the go. And you don't have to go through a major crisis to benefit from therapy. Sometimes you just need that check-in, just having someone to talk to, making sure you're hitting the goals, the small goals, weekly, taking those steps to where you want to be ultimately in your life. Your well-being is worth it. So visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So Joey Bosa picked the Bills over the 49ers, presumably because they look like they have a better shot to win a Super Bowl than the 49ers do. And the 49ers clearly have made a point this offseason. They're trying to get cheaper. They've been one of the top cash spending teams in the NFL. But some 49ers fans are a little bit worried. This looks like a teardown and a complete rebuild rather than a retool on the fly. The 49ers have lost 9-10 starters from their Super Bowl team last year, and 9 starters from week 1 in 2024. Now, I think that the 49ers have lost a ton of players, Matt, for sure. They have. Mm-hmm. But, is losing Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd going to crush your hopes as a football team? It's not, but you start to look at where the 49ers are, and it's like, okay, you didn't get Joey Bosa, but right now you only have one starting defensive lineman in Nick Bosa. And so names are dropping off the free agent list. You only have so many draft picks. Are you going to draft 3 starting defensive linemen in year 1, right? And so you do start to look at this team and like, well, there's some holes that might not get filled to the highest level for a Super Bowl window team, even though you still got Trent Williams and George Kittle and Nick Bosa, and you're probably going to pay your expensive quarterback. But they're a fascinating team. Are they going to be this year's version of the Buffalo Bills where, everyone's going to predict their demise, that they tore it down, and they're like, nope, they're still good and got a good quarterback and a good coach, and they're going to be fine? Or is this sort of the beginning of a completely new era where that Super Bowl window is gone and they have to build a new one? What do you think, Matt, when you look at this team from the outside?
So I know people criticize us for talking about our 2 teams maybe a little too much. And hey, guilty as charged. I'm not going to ignore that. But I feel like you're probably dealing with a similar situation that I'm dealing with my team right now, too. And I just pulled it up while you were looking. Jason over at Over the Cap does an unbelievable job. And if you look at my Twitter feed, I just tweeted out the projected comp picks from a year from now. The comp picks just came out today for this upcoming draft, but the Steelers are loaded with comp picks. The Niners are loaded with comp picks for next year. And I don't want to speak for your team, but like pretty much everyone the Steelers lost, they knew they were going to lose. They weren't bringing back Najee Harris. They weren't bringing back Dan Moore after drafting 2 tackles. They have 2 guards. They're letting James Daniels go. They knew either Fields or Wilson was going to go, and that was part of the math of it all. You give up a 6th-round pick for Fields, use him for a year, and then he gets you a 3rd-round comp pick the next year. And Wilson's kind of the same way. And I kind of get the same feeling with the Niners, although I think your group's getting hit a little harder. I tend to think that when we get back tomorrow, the Steelers will have a quarterback. That's haven't been able to do it yet. But some of this is planned. People don't look at it that way. Like, man, we're losing so much more than we're gaining. Yeah, that's by design to get comp picks because we knew we were going to lose these guys. And I don't know. Do you agree with me? Do you kind of feel like that's what the Niners are doing?
To continue to pay the guys that you want to pay.
Right.
And, you draft a 1st-round wide receiver, you pay Ayuk, so you trade Deebo Samuel. Like that was something going to happen. They drafted Talanoa Hufanga's replacement last year, and Malik Mustafa looked really good as a rookie. Hufanga,
that's how you're supposed to do it, right?
Really good players, but they've been banged up a lot. So you're trying to get healthier, trying to get younger. Travarius Ward, they replaced him with Renardo Green, rookie last year. So they've got their starters. Deandre Lenore already paid. So Travarius Ward leaves. And, so there's a plan for a lot of it. Some of it, not as much. And some of it was, there was maybe some mismanagement and they could be stronger in some other places. So it's not nothing, but it's a lot less than it looks like when you just see like player after player after player. And you talked about it with Dan Moore, and Aaron Banks is the same. Good player, Aaron Banks. Not giving him $18 million per year, especially with the build that the 49ers have. You can find yourself a left guard.
Yeah, and, like Jalen Moore and Dan Moore, like they're not worth the money they got, but they're offensive tackles, and you pay more. How funny. And, but that's kind of good management by their old team.
Well, it's funny. Jalen Moore is this fascinating one, too, because he's the 3rd tackle on the 49ers. And every 49ers fan would tell you, you got to draft an offensive tackle because you need to get better at right tackle. You could be better than McKivitz at right tackle, and Trent Williams is probably going to retire at some point soon. But what would be fascinating is if Jalen Moore is the starting left tackle on the Kansas City Chiefs next year and Trent Williams has retired and you already had that guy already on your roster for the 49ers. So that's a really interesting one to watch going forward. And he was nice and solid in his 5 games filling in for Trent Williams last year, but that got him $15 million per year. And that's how hurting the league is for offensive tackles. I think Jalen Moore and Dan Moore were the perfect examples of that.
Yeah, I find it interesting, and I think the Niners are the poster boy for this, but maybe even Houston, that teams that are, and you look at any mock draft, team needs O-lines at the top of the list, and people are plucking away their offensive linemen that they're letting go. What do we do? Is the buyer going to have some remorse here? Because the people who know them well are letting guys go at that price.
And don't forget, these 4-year contracts that look like a lot of money, guess what? Ain't going to see that 4th year. Remember the Christian Kirk contract is one that's really going to stand out to me as a great example of this. It's like, oh my God, you gave Christian Kirk what? It's like, yeah, he's not seeing the last year of his deal. And what happened? He got cut before the end of his contract this offseason. And so that happens a lot in free agency as well. And the way these contracts are structured, and they end up being a lot different than what that first agent report is. Speaking of contracts, how about the contract that will be altered more than any in NFL history, maybe going forward in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes? They pulled that over again to get under the salary cap and be compliant this afternoon, Wednesday, March 12th. Free agency officially begins. Teams have to be cap compliant. The Chiefs were the last team. They are now. And it's just every year, restructure. I have no clue what Patrick Mahomes' contract looks like now. It was 10 years, $500 million. No idea how much he gets per year, where that money is, how many years are even left. It's just a living, breathing document.
Absolutely. I mean, we kind of mentioned this when Josh Allen signed his latest deal with the Bills. Is now you're kind of part of the franchise. I mean, like, you're part of management. You know, you're a tag team. You know, it's not an employer relationship at this point. You know, Brady and the Patriots, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a wonderful situation to be in. I trust you. You trust me. We're both going to make millions, maybe billions when it's all said and done, and hopefully have some rings. And I think people know this by now, but 4:00 today, Wednesday, is really the official start of the league year. So even those guys, and rarely does it happen, but all these agreed to terms that happen during the tampering period, they're not official. Once in a while, a guy will still back out of it. You know, I mean,
Anthony Barr a few years ago.
Yeah.
He was going to leave Minnesota, then changed his mind and ended up signing back with Minnesota before the actual stuff was turned in. And, you know, some of these contracts, when you see the paperwork, might look a little bit different. You know, players like the guy we're going to talk about next, Aaron Rodgers, officially becomes available as well. Do we have an idea of where Aaron Rodgers is going to end up? And we got to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, who have revamped their entire look from coach to quarterback to coordinators all the way down. What does that mean for the team in Las Vegas, short and long term? Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson on the Locked On Podcast Network, brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness. It's here. It's March 12th. Love this time of year. I know there's no football games, but the football offseason is so fun. You can bet on NFL draft props. You can bet on your team if you're excited about what they did in free agency to win the next Super Bowl. But it's also tourney time. March Madness is here, and FanDuel gives you the chance to get in on all the action like never before. And right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and who's cutting down the nets. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. Makes it so easy to bet on spreads, totals, game props. The tournament games happening almost every day. It's fast and furious. There's almost always something exciting to bet on. And all you got to do is go to FanDuel.com or download the app and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com.
BP, I thought a super quick story, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And this is kind of an example of how the world works in the NFL. So the Jags drafted Tyson Alualu. Then when his contract was up with the Steelers a couple of years ago, the Jags re-signed him. And at this point, it was like, oh, it's a done deal. He's going back to Jacksonville. But it was a COVID year. He couldn't fly down there. So he was still hovering around in Pittsburgh. And Cam Hayward takes him out to dinner. And before the league year opens at Wednesday at 4:00, that contract never got signed, and he resigned with the Steelers. You know, like, there's always like one of them a year.
Mentality. It's like the boyfriend shows up on the doorstep with flowers, and they, you know, it's like, okay, let's get together. Let's not do this. And so we'll see what happens officially. Man, that COVID offseason was strange. All the draft reviews happening, and everything was just like virtual, and a lot of weird stuff. A lot of weird stuff happened. I didn't
know what a Zoom call was before that. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe too much Zoom. Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I used to be a Steeler.
It's been quiet, and the Steelers have been quiet. It's curious.
Because Rodgers is a Jet until 4.
Too quiet. The Steelers been too quiet at quarterback. You're not going to completely let the league decide who your quarterback is, right? So maybe is there some kind of line we can draw between Aaron Rodgers he's been quiet. His market's been quiet. Has this been something maybe they've had figured out for a while?
I lean that way. I also think he might be in a dark hole with mushrooms and acid or whatever, doing whatever he does, thinking about it, because
deciding if he wants to play at all.
He's been linked to the Vikings, which makes no sense to me. I mean, don't rock that boat with your your second-year quarterback. It sounds like he had a meeting with the Giants, and he wouldn't have to move his apartment or house or whatever. I mean, that would make some sense, or a desperate team. But I think it's either the Giants or the Steelers. And I think the Steelers are either going to have Rodgers as their first choice and Wilson as their 2. And that's the way it goes. And I think that I get this all the time. Why haven't the Steelers made a quarterback move? And I think in kind of the back of my head, I think they want Rodgers, and Rodgers is going to pick here. And you can't do anything till 4:00 today because he's a New York Jet right now.
It's the best situation for Rodgers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Better chance.
I just wanted to come to camp, and I want to be in the cafeteria with him and interview him and just add to the craziness.
Yeah, and see what that's like. And we were talking about that a couple days ago. Like, how about that circus at quarterback if it's
oh man,
they draft Shedeur Sanders too, and like just seeing how that works and the personalities, and that would be a fun.
DK Metcalf and Pickens, and right.
Yeah, I'm kind of rooting for it. So if that does happen, we'll talk more about. And
I would think the next 24 hours there's an answer there.
So we'll put that one on the back burner for now. One thing we have seen is a lot of action in Las Vegas with the Raiders, and on one hand, look, Pete Carroll's. Like, how long can you plan around Pete Carroll, right? How long can you plan around Geno Smith being your quarterback? But I love it in the short term, and I think if I had to put it simply and stamp the Raiders off season with something, it would be culture change.
Yes,
and I think it's really important. You got Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. What could that all start to look like? Brock Bowers, a young star tight end. They added Alex Kappa. They've added Landon Roberts. Let's see, who else did they add? Trevon Merrick left. Nate Hobbs left in the defensive back. Some work to do in the back seven still for the Raiders. They brought in Jeremy Chin though at safety.
Good player, yeah.
They lost Divine Diablo at linebacker, but man, Geno.
I think they're respectable now.
They're respectable. They're climbing to the middle, and they're building a culture. And I wonder what the secession is, because you can't plan that Pete Carroll and Geno Smith are going to be there and an important part of the build beyond the next couple of years, right? But you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to build that culture, and that's what it's all about right now. It's
very different, and I don't expect the same results, but I kind of think it reminds me of the Commanders a year ago. You had a new owner. You brought in a lot of new bodies. You brought in the Ertzes and Ecklers and Bobby Wagners of the world. And like, man, why are they getting all these old guys? Culture change, and they knew they were going to draft a quarterback high. I don't know if the Raiders will. I still think it could be a Shedeur landing spot. I bet they draft a quarterback, and I tend to think that Will Howard could be the Ohio State Chip Kelly connection. And that might not be your answer, but I bet they draft a quarterback. And you look at the team now, it's like, this team can win games. I mean, they're not a mess. They don't have holes everywhere. And two big things to me just on the field are when you go from being kind, a bottom 5 quarterback situation last year, to the 10th, 11th, 12th, that is a massive ramification on the field. And I look at the D-line. Max Crosby's been a staple, but he's not going anywhere. You bring back Malcolm Kuntz, who was out all last year, and he's a really good number 2. No one knows who Adam Butler is, but he's a high-quality, big defensive tackle. And, oh, by the way, Christian Wilkins is coming back. So now you got a quarterback and you got a D-line. That's not a bad place to start.
Now that they look at it, losing both Robert Spillane and Devon Diablo at linebacker, like that is a massive need right now when you look at that football team. And I don't know that there's a linebacker they would draft at number 6 overall, but I think it's something they might attack in the NFL draft for sure.
Yeah.
There,
Roberts is just a plugger. He's a former Steeler banger, easy to like, but he's not an every down player. I would have brought back Mooring too, the safety. That was one of the younger guys. I didn't quite understand why they let him go.
I mean, I get why you didn't sign him. That's a big money contract for a safety these days. $70 million per year. He got 3 for 51. And the Carolina Panthers were out here paying anybody they could on their own team, paying anybody they could on other teams, because they just need talent. And so that was one of those situations where, man, they just have money to spend. And Trevon Merrick is a good player, but is he someone you're going to drop that much money on? Is there a player that you can replace him with somewhat easily in the draft? Again, still back seven, still something that they need to add. But I think you nailed it with, look, first of all, the stability and just having a good head coach that has a plan, that understands how to win in the NFL and what that needs to look like when you put it together. But having a quarterback, instead of your team having a worse quarterback than the other team almost every single week,
right.
half of the weeks you're as good or better than the teams across from you. I mean, that is massive alone. That's the biggest jump you can make in the NFL.
Unfortunately, it's never going to be against Mahomes or Herbert, but it's better than it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I think maybe Genty ends up there.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
Pete Carroll move, right?
Yeah, I mean, Pete Carroll's old school. I mean, he's in his 70s. Guys in their 70s are more apt to draft a running back than guys in their 30s. That are in charge, guys in their 30s and 40s. So, I could see it. I could see a lot. I think they put themselves in a pretty good spot where it's just like, okay, who's best player available? If Genty, I think Genty's going to be wearing a gold jacket in 15 years, then you draft Genty. You could go Will Johnson. You could go just about any defensive player. You could go
anything the back seven makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Or you could go quarterback. So best player available. Block it in.
Maybe even another wideout,
Yeah. Oh, Ted McMillan. I could absolutely see that. Yeah. Let's score some points.
Yeah, I like it. They just got a massive facelift, and I think it was a good move.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Hit us with those questions. We've got some post-free agency mailbag now that phase one is not done, but the big stuff has mostly happened. Any questions you have about your team or the rest of the league, hit us for this week's mailbag at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there on YouTube or anywhere you listen to this podcast. And Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.